Labor Day in a state and country that is working differently. We look at what's changed about work and what stubbornly remains the same. Downtown businesses didn't love when we said that employees weren't returning to offices, so the business group has changed the way that it puts out those numbers. My view on how staffing shortages have revealed a lack of civility from customers that's been tolerated for way too long. Colorado's Paralympians come home, shinier than they left. And Denver's largest mural might be the last one for one of the city's most prolific street artists. All that is next. Labor Day hits different after some of us spent a good part of the last 12 months working from home. And Labor Day certainly hits different for employers, struggling to convince employees to come back to the office or to get people to even accept open jobs. Our Steve Staker gets us started tonight on what has changed and what's here to stay in the world of work.
It is remarkable how fast we have come back.
If the pandemic blindsided our economy, the recovery caught it off guard too.
Just like we could not predict the downturn, we could not predict the upturn of the economy either.
Dr. Kishore Kulkarni teaches economics at MSU Denver.
The technological revolution of last 20 years has subsided the bad economic effects of corona.
We don't know all the answers right now.
Dr. Matt Klaus, a professor of finance at DU.
In many cases, jobs and workforce are being redefined. The workforce is trying to figure out, do we really need to have everybody in an office?
Both of them agree more office work will continue to be done outside the office, at home, even when COVID finally gives us a break.
It took the pandemic to instigate the thought about a lot of the changes that are going on in the workforce now.
Companies are looking for some cost-cutting ways, and there are companies willfully are telling employees stay at home.
Employers are having a tough time filling the jobs that won't let folks stay at home, hence all the help wanted sign.
We really don't have a shortage of labor. We just have a shortage of people who want to come back to work at what they were doing before. And that's because things have changed.
Both Kulkarni and Klaus say that the shortage of workers will drive wages up for those jobs.
The wages will go up, and they should, because labor has suffered the most in the last 2 years.
We've had issues in the past where there have been movements to try to raise the minimum wage rate, but now we're seeing things that are even higher than what's been proposed.
Now, those gains in wages are likely to stick around well after the pandemic, and it might mean that you, the consumer, will have to pay more for the cost of goods. Quite a few restaurant owners have told me that that's the way that this has to change in order for them to take care of their employees. They're going to have to charge more maybe for your meal at a restaurant.
Steve, the professors that you talk to also get a view of what's happening in the world of work because they are training people for future jobs, first or second careers.
From two different perspectives. So Dr. Kulkarni is at MSU Denver, where he says that he's noticed enrollment has gone down with all the open jobs on the market, which is something he sees quite frequently. Whereas Dr. Klaus says over at DU, they're seeing a lot of people enroll in the graduate school in order to try to change that career. Maybe they did something where they had to come into the office. They don't like that idea now, so they're trying to do something different.
And of course, when we talk about the way the world of work changed, it not just changes our homes and our family lives, it changes our cities. We watched the way that downtown Denver hollowed out during the pandemic and then the waiting game for workers to come back.
Yeah, they were begging for people to come back. Remember that big brothery kind of technology that the Downtown Denver Partnership was using to see if workers were returning to downtown? They have stopped reporting that data publicly after we pointed out that it seemed to show that workers weren't coming back as fast as they thought. The data comes from a company called Placer AI. It uses anonymous location data from a bunch of different cell phone apps to try to estimate how many visitors, workers, and residents are downtown on a given day. Back in June, we told you that data seemed to show that only about a quarter of workers were back downtown. And after that story, the partnership stopped reporting that number of workers whenever they gave a data update. We asked why. They said that they found that workers only counted if they were coming downtown regularly for at least 90 days. So they're waiting a bit to provide more accurate data before they pump that number out again. In that same data report, the partnership also provides some Google visit data. It shows that trips to the office are still down about 41% when you compare it to the baseline back in early of 2020. That's better than the early days of the pandemic, but still low, Kyle.
Your trips to the office back at 100%.
100, yeah.
Boss said 100. There you are. All right, Steve Stager, my beard wants to be your beard when it grows up.
You're working on it.
Good to see you. Colorado's unemployment rate on this Labor Day is nothing to brag about, 6.1%. That is 36th in the U.S. So today, the state emphasized a different metric of our workforce. The state celebrated the jobs recovered from the pits of the pandemic. State claims Colorado has a job recovery rate of 77.3%, almost 3% higher than the national average. A common thread that I've seen in the signs that warn customers about the impacts of staffing shortages is a plea for people to just be kind to the employees who showed up to work. The abuse suffered by food service, retail, and hospitality employees in the face of irate and entitled customers, that well precedes the pandemic. But maybe, as employers figure out what kind of wages and benefits are required to find willing workers, they will also now adopt a no-tolerance policy for abusive customers. I think we're past the days of the customer is always right. Sometimes the customer is wrong. Sometimes the customer is a jerk. Sometimes the customer needs to be told to get out and never come back again. Signs asking people to be civil to your employees are fine. But the way for employers to protect their employees isn't by asking customers not to abuse people. It's by making clear that abusive language and abusive behavior is a fast ticket to the door, each and every time. Tonight's next question comes from a viewer named Lenore. She's a transplant patient eligible for a COVID-19 booster. After receiving that third shot, Lenore says she got an email from Walgreens telling her to come back and get a second dose. Made her wonder how and if the state is accurately counting those booster shots. That is a good question, Lenore. The state tells us they're counting booster shots as part of their cumulative doses administered data. If you ever see that number used, you'll see that it is significantly larger than the total number of people fully and partially vaccinated. The state says that providers are required to report booster shots into the Colorado Immunization Information System, the SIS system, and that database should accurately reflect the number of COVID vaccine doses you've received. You can go online and check that. As far as Walgreens or anybody else inviting you to get a second dose after you got a booster, state says that's just an error on the part of the company. So far, 7 million doses of COVID vaccine have been administered in Colorado. 62% of the state's total population is at least partially vaccinated, and 57% of total population fully vaccinated. We Don't Waste is a Colorado nonprofit that helps to solve two problems at once: fighting food waste and hunger. Your Word of Thanks campaign last week raised nearly $25,000 to help We Don't Waste set up a new mobile food market in an underserved neighborhood. That nonprofit picks up food that restaurants and other businesses aren't going to be able to use in time and then quickly gets it to people in our community who need it. Your Word of Thanks micro-giving campaigns have now raised more than $4.6 million since last year, and I'll be back with a new idea on Wednesday. The plan to put two of Colorado's members of Congress in the same redrawn district does not necessarily mean they will face each other. The faces along Brighton Boulevard, they made bold displays like this one possible.
I wanted to paint something that actually said something, especially about the area.
And they're arriving home with the hardware, the Coloradans, who are among the best Paralympians in the world. Next. The people redrawing Colorado's congressional districts get their official look tonight at the new map prepared by their staff. It's the map that puts the face of Colorado's Republican Party in the same district as one of the Democratic Party's rising stars. The significant shift between the first map on the left and the newer map on the right is in the 2nd Congressional District. It's there in green. Democratic Congressman Joe Neguse represents that district now. The new map includes part of Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's district, including where she lives. The proposed new 8th district, drawn in Adams, Denver, Larimer, and Weld counties, would be almost 40% Hispanic. Increasing Hispanic representation and political power is one goal of this commission. The commission needs to agree on a final plan by September 28th, and they'll start holding public hearings tomorrow. If the new map is adopted, and it's certain to change in some way or another, this does not mean that Representatives Neguse and Boebert are automatically going to run against each other. Now, Neguse is certain to run again in his 2nd district. Boebert could move to the other side of I-70 and run as a resident of her redrawn district to avoid facing Neguse, or she could stay put in the house she lives in and still run in her current district. There's no requirement that House members actually live in the district they represent. As we approach 20 years since the 9/11 terrorist attacks, our colleague Gary Shapiro has taken an in-depth look back at that moment that changed America. Here's a bit of Gary's first story, a series that starts tomorrow.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
It appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness,
Oh God,
there's another one.
Again, it appears that an aircraft of some sort did hit the side of the Pentagon.
People here at the scene say there are no large pieces of debris even left from the plane. No hope of, at this point, there seems to be no hope of survivors.
It's hard to reflect back on the way we felt that day, but this place forces you to. Deep holes in the ground, surrounded by the names of nearly 3,000 people. Some who were just going about living their lives that day. Others who faced down danger to try and help a stranger. Each name etched in pain. Together they form the soul of the 9/11 Memorial.
The entire story, put together by our Gary Shapiro and photojournalist Manny Sotelo and John Kurt, airs tomorrow morning, Mile High Mornings at 6 a.m. Their series of stories this week lead up to their special, Remember the Sky, 20 years after 9/11. It airs on 9 News this coming Saturday at 6 p.m.
Hot, hazy, and warm this Labor Day with temperatures in the mid-90s, about 10 degrees warmer than we typically see this time of year. We'll see the thickening of the smoke and haze ahead of a weak cool front that will bring temperatures down about 10 degrees tomorrow. Air quality alerts posted for ozone, but also for wildfire smoke. Limited moisture for thunderstorms, tracking a couple along the Colorado-New Mexico line. This front coming in from the north really won't change our weather picture a whole lot tomorrow, and we'll see that cool down and a wind shift and hopefully an improvement in that smoke and haze in about 24 hours. Temperatures in the 90s now, dropping into the 80s after sunset, and your extended forecast includes again that cooling trend for Tuesday and Wednesday ahead of potentially record high temperatures Thursday and Friday. Another front on Saturday with highs in the mid 80s heading into next weekend.
Colorado's Paralympians are returning from Tokyo carrying new medals and new records. Elizabeth Marks from the Springs racked up the most hardware of the Coloradans: gold, silver, and bronze in 3 different swimming events. She set the world record in backstroke. Last week, we told you Sophia Herzog from Fairplay swam for bronze in the 100-meter breaststroke. Coloradans Chuck Aoki, Eric Newby, and Adam Scaturo helped Team USA secure the silver in wheelchair rugby. Haley Dance is bringing a silver medal in the triathlon back home to Colorado Springs. If you're wondering how NEC's second favorite Olympic team fared, Team Liberia had 2 athletes participating. Patience Johnson and Thomas Mulba both competed in the javelin throw, out of the medals in 9th and 11th place. The River North Arts District is covered in street murals, none quite like this one.
The whole point of it is that if you can paint it big on your own, that's the accomplishment.
Big in size, bigger in message. Pretty sure the message here is that you are entering a laid-back state. Next. Denver's largest mural is the work of an artist who believes in making big statements. Photojournalist Byron Reed caught up with Gamma Gallery.
For over 10 years, Gamma Acosta has been letting his artwork speak for itself.
It's about the message. You can paint something big and have like all the talent in the world, but if you're not saying anything with it, I mean, then it's just wallpaper.
Acosta, who goes by the name of Gamma Gallery, is a Denver graffiti artist.
I pride myself on actually being able to paint, so I don't use grids or projectors.
And has been working on a big project for the past 3 years.
It's dedicated to the art scene that made Rhino possible.
He says they're portraits of Denver artists who recently passed away.
We have Bits, Icon, Scape, Doer, and Preach. It's the biggest mural in Colorado. That's about one concept. There's a bigger one in Pueblo, but that's not one mural. That's a bunch of murals.
The mural is 400 feet wide and 36 feet tall.
It's corrugated metal, corner to corner.
With elements, he says, people must see in person.
I've carved into certain sections of it so that the sky and the light can shine through. Yeah, it'll create like a braille pattern. And the cars are driving through it, it'll sprinkle sunlight on your car.
He says he wanted to paint something that represents the area.
The Rhino Art District, it wouldn't exist the way it does without the graffiti artists, because the graffiti artists are the ones that brought the street artists in.
Gamma says it was important to give back to the artists who helped create a neighborhood and helped him develop a voice of his own.
The message is that anybody successful stands on the shoulders of giants.
For Next,
even if you've never heard of them.
I'm Byron Reed.
How cool are those cutouts? That's neat. Gamma says he's paying for this project out of pocket. It means that much to him. After a decade of his work popping up around Denver, he says this might just be his final public project. There was briefly a new message for people arriving in our state from Nebraska. It's the most Colorado thing we saw today. Plus your feedback next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is somebody chilling at an entrance to this colorful state. Our viewer Carol was coming in on I-76 when she saw a guy had rigged up his hammock hanging from the Welcome to Colorful Colorado sign. Looks like he's taking a selfie. Maybe he's on FaceTime with somebody. If there's a selfie and you're watching, dude, and you want to send it in, we'll share that too. Send us the most Colorado things you see. Email next@9news.com. or use the hashtag HeyNext on Twitter. That's how I find your comments throughout the show to get a read on what you're thinking about what we're talking about here. That's how I got Nancy Cooper's comment tonight, who said, thanks for standing up for those of us in customer service, working the front desk, retail, hospitality, etc. Nancy writes, I have been yelled at more in the last year than in all of my many years of working. She closed with simply, be kind, people. But about my comments suggesting zero tolerance for abusive customers, Kaylin, also on Twitter, always insightful in her years of viewership, wrote in, I agree, but the problem is that you rely on low-wage workers to handle it. She says most stores can't afford security. That's true. We've talked about that idea, especially when it came to grocery workers having clashes over masks. That's the last thing you want to put on their lap. See you next time.